All right, ready to dive into some serious strategy. We're talking Sun Tzu's Art of War, a guide so legendary it's been studied by everyone from, well, ancient samurai to modern-day CEOs.
Mhm. It's kind of wild how this text, written centuries ago in ancient China, still resonates today.
Right. It's not every day you hear about football coaches and business leaders using ancient military tactics to crush it. So what's the deal? Can we really apply these strategies to, say, nail a job interview or even win a friendly argument?
Absolutely. Sun Tzu was all about achieving victory through strategy and outsmarting your opponent. It's about being strategic and adaptable, not just about brute force.
Okay, so no need to enlist in the army just yet. We're looking at excerpts from El Arte de la Guerra Sun Tzu.pdf, a Spanish translation of The Art of War. And let me tell you, it's dense. But don't worry, we're not training to be generals overnight, right? We're pulling out the good stuff, those timeless strategies you can use in any situation where you need to, I don't know, win.
And winning for Sun Tzu wasn't always about crushing the competition. He was all about achieving those goals with the least amount of conflict possible.
So it's like picking your battles, being strategic about it.
Exactly. He lays out a framework, actually, for assessing any conflict. He highlights these 5 essential factors: doctrine, time, terrain, leadership, and discipline.
Okay, those sound pretty straightforward at first glance, but I have a feeling it's more nuanced than that. What did he really mean by those, though?
Well, he breaks it down, of course. Doctrine is about being unified and aligned. Like, imagine a team project, right? How all does everyone understand the goal? Do they even believe in it? That's doctrine. And then time. It's not just about the clock, but understanding the rhythm of a situation. Is it the right moment to make your move?
So like in a meeting, knowing when to speak up at the right time, or even timing the stock market.
Exactly. And then terrain. This goes beyond just the physical space. Think of it like the lay of the land in a job interview. Are you dealing with a tough crowd, or are they receptive to new
Okay,
ideas?
this is making a lot more sense now. What about leadership and discipline?
Huge. Sun Tzu believed a good leader needs wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, even courage. And discipline. Oh, he was all about that. Clear plans, strong communication, using resources wisely, all about that planning life.
Speaking of planning, Sun Tzu gives us 7 key considerations, right? It's like a self-audit before you head into a battle.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to ask yourself, who is the better strategy? Who's got the stronger team? These make you really look at your own strengths and weaknesses, all while sizing up your opponent.
This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from The Art of War. Invincibility lies in oneself, vulnerability in the adversary.
Such a good one, right? It really highlights how important self-awareness is for any strategy. You can't exploit your opponent's weaknesses if you don't even know your own right.
It's like, you know that saying, you can't love someone else until you love yourself? Well, it's like the strategy version. So before you can even think about winning, you got to get your own act together.
Exactly. Then you can craft that winning game plan. And that's where Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception and surprise comes in.
Okay, this is where things get interesting. All warfare is based on deception. That's a line everyone's heard. What does that even mean, though, outside of, actual war?
Right. It sounds more intense than it is. It's about being strategic with information, keeping your opponent guessing. You can use what they assume about you against them.
Okay, so how would you even use that? Like in a job interview, for example.
Okay, imagine you're a shoe designer, right? You're interviewing at a company known for classic styles. You could just blend in, talk about traditional designs. Or you could talk about pushing boundaries, introducing edgy elements. You create intrigue, you stand out.
So it's about playing up your strengths, adding that air of mystery.
Exactly. Sun Tzu was all about that calculated ambiguity. He talked about appearing formless, always changing your approach so no one can predict you. Kind of relevant, right? The world's moving fast. You got to be able to adapt.
Totally. So we've got self-awareness, strategic planning, and a dash of mystery. What other tricks does Sun Tzu have up his sleeve?
Well, this is where it gets good. Sun Tzu was all about this idea of shi. It translates to strategic advantage, but it's also about momentum.
Oh, I like that. Riding the wave, seizing the moment.
Yes, and she has this psychological impact. When you have that momentum, your confidence goes up, decisions get easier, and your opponent starts to doubt themselves. Success breeds success.
It's that snowball effect. It's like you said, the impetus of one charging down is like the round rock rolling down a mountain thousands of feet high. You can't stop that.
He was very into his metaphors.
For sure. But then he also spends a lot of time talking about intelligence and espionage. Feels a little less relevant to negotiating a phone plan. you know?
You'd be surprised. Look, Sun Tzu's chapters on espionage might seem intense, but the idea is information is power. Think about it. Before you even call about your phone bill, you probably compare plans, check out other companies, right? That's gathering intel.
Wow, never thought of it like that. So, not saying we should all become spies, but staying informed in any situation is key to making good decisions.
Right. He goes on and on about the 5 types of spies, each with their own role. It's all about understanding the people around you, their motivations, their weaknesses.
Fascinating. So we've covered so much ancient wisdom for the modern world. Before we go full secret agent, though, let's take a step back. What's the biggest takeaway?
For me, it's all about understanding human nature. These strategies, they're not just for winning battles. They're about navigating how people interact no matter the situation.
So less of a war manual, more like a guide to understanding people, whether you're facing an army or just trying to get your cat to eat its food.
Exactly. Think strategically, adapt to change, always stay one step ahead.
On that note, we're going to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into the art of war. But first, in a world obsessed with speed and brute force, what would it look like to slow down? To use Sun Tzu's principles of patience and calculated action in our own lives? Something to think about.
It's a good question, right? We're so used to thinking winning means always going full throttle. But Sun Tzu reminds us that sometimes the real strength is knowing when to hold back, when to choose your battles.
It's about playing the long game, not always going for that quick win.
Exactly. Recognizing that every interaction has its own rhythm, and you can learn to move with that rhythm, even use your opponent's energy against them, just like a martial artist.
Which brings us back to Sun Tzu's idea about momentum. You were talking about Shi earlier.
Right, right. That strategic advantage. It's not just a one-time thing, though. It can shift and change, so you have to be able to recognize those shifts, adapt your approach on the fly.
So reading the room, sensing the energy, and just adjusting.
Yes, being nimble, mentally and strategically. He always said that clinging to a plan, even a really good one, could be a disaster.
Because things change. Whether you're on a battlefield or just, dealing with life, it's rare that things go exactly according to plan.
So true. He was big on observation, too. Not just literally, but understanding the nuances of the situation, like metaphorically. He used the example of different types of terrain to illustrate this point.
Right, all those different kinds of ground. Dispersive ground, light ground, key ground. It's a lot.
It is. But more than memorizing those terms, though, it's about understanding you can't use the same strategy for every single situation, right?
Adapt or die, basically.
Well, maybe not that dramatic. The point is, we have to be constantly observing and adjusting our approach.
Being present, going with the flow.
Yeah.
It's like they say, the only constant is change.
Exactly. And that brings up another key part of his philosophy, calculated risks.
Because fortune favors the bold, right?
Not necessarily. Sun Tzu would say that every action, every decision has to be weighed carefully. Look at the potential rewards, but also the potential risks.
So, no rushing in headfirst.
Not if you can avoid it. True courage is about knowing when to make a move and when to hold back.
That's a tough one to learn. Sometimes it just feels easier, braver, to just go for it.
It can. But a skilled strategist knows how to conserve their energy, picking their battles carefully. It's like a marathon. You don't want to go full speed right away and burn yourself out.
So patience really is a virtue, even when things get intense.
Absolutely. Sun Tzu believed that mastering your own impulses, not letting your emotions rule you, gives you an edge.
Staying cool under pressure, basically.
Exactly. Which loops back to self-awareness. You can't make those strategic decisions if you don't understand your own, tendencies, your weaknesses even.
Right. It's like know thyself, but on a deeper level, understanding why you do what you do, your strengths, your weaknesses.
Yes. And that self-awareness applies to how you interact with other people, too. He emphasized this idea of unity, being aligned with your team.
A divided house cannot stand.
Exactly. He knew that internal conflict, whether it's at work or even with your family, can be just as damaging as any external threat.
So communication is key.
Absolutely. He believed in clear instructions and making sure everyone was on the same page. But it goes beyond logistics, It's about that sense of shared purpose, building trust with the people around you.
Creating a team, not just a group of individuals, right?
Precisely. And that takes real leadership. Sun Tzu believed that a good leader doesn't rule by fear or intimidation. It's about inspiring your team through wisdom, through generosity, and really caring about your people.
That's definitely different than a lot of what we see today.
It is, yeah. But think about the leaders you admire. They probably inspire trust, show competence, and have integrity, right? They put the team first.
Leading by example, inspiring people to want to follow them, not just because they have to.
Exactly. Sun Tzu's point is that real leadership empowers those around you to be their best, not about just telling people what to do.
So less about orders, more about sharing a vision.
Exactly. And that takes not only understanding strategy, but also understanding people, their psychology.
Because everyone's different. Some people are motivated by rewards, others by a challenge.
Exactly. And a good leader recognizes that, figuring out how to inspire their team to work together.
It's about figuring out everyone's strengths, how they fit together to achieve the same goal.
Right. And that reminds me of another thing Sun Tzu talked about: deception and surprise. Remember, all warfare is based on deception.
Yeah, one of his most famous lines.
Yeah.
And maybe the most misunderstood.
It's definitely open to interpretation. But he wasn't saying to go around lying and cheating. It's about using perception to your advantage, keeping people guessing.
More about strategy than just being dishonest.
Right. Keeping the element of surprise, understanding what your opponent expects you to do, and then flipping the script.
So like playing mind games.
Sort of. But again, not about manipulation. It's about using strategy, intelligence to shape the situation to your advantage.
Like that saying, the best defense is a good offense.
In a way, yeah. Taking control, dictating how things play out.
Being proactive, anticipating what's coming next.
Yes, and that requires really understanding your opponent, knowing their motivations, what they're good at, even what they're bad at.
Which goes back to information gathering, right? We've come full circle.
Absolutely. Information is power. He was really big on having spies and scouts gathering intel.
And while we're not all hiring private investigators, the idea is the same, right?
Yeah.
The more you know, the better decisions you can make.
Precisely. Whether you're running a business, asking for a raise, or just dealing with life's everyday chaos, information is key.
Knowledge is power. Sun Tzu would approve. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But we'll be right back with even more insights from Sun Tzu's Art of War and how you can use them in your life. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. Still strategizing with Sun Tzu and the Art of War. We've talked about so much already: being adaptable, understanding yourself, even a bit of espionage for the modern world. But I think there's one more big idea we need to unpack: leadership.
Oh, definitely. Sun Tzu was all about it. And his ideas about what makes a good leader, they still hold up today.
Yeah, he talks a lot about that connection between a leader and their, quote, troops. But obviously, he's not just talking about military leadership, right?
Right. It's more universal than that. Anytime you're trying to achieve something big, it takes a team effort, right? A group of people working together.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. But Sun Tzu takes it a step further. He says a true leader doesn't lead through fear or intimidation. It's about inspiring people through wisdom, generosity, actually caring about the people you're leading.
That sounds good in theory, but what about, like, the real world? Imagine a high-pressure job, deadlines looming. How does that kind of leadership actually work?
It starts with having a vision, a clear goal that everyone understands, something that really resonates with the team. Like, imagine a tech startup, right? If the founder truly believes in their product, that passion spreads. It's contagious.
So it's about more than just telling people what to do. It's about getting them excited about the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that takes communication, being a good listener, having empathy. A good leader understands their team's needs and concerns.
It's true. You're only as good as your team in the end, right?
100%. Sun Tzu believed that everyone, from the bottom to the top, has a role to play in achieving victory.
Valuing every single person's contributions, seeing their strengths.
Yes. He talked about delegation, trusting your team, but also recognizing and rewarding good work. People need to know that what they do matters.
Creating a culture where everyone feels appreciated, respected for what they bring to the table.
Absolutely. And that takes a leader who leads not just with their head, but also their heart.
Right, because you can always tell when someone's being fake. If a leader doesn't actually care about their team, it shows.
Totally. And that lack of trust, it can poison everything. Even the best plan won't work if people don't trust each other.
Which goes back to Sun Tzu's whole thing about self-awareness. If you don't know yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, how can you expect to lead anyone?
So true. And being self-aware as a leader means thinking about how your actions affect others, not just your team, even your competitors.
Thinking about the bigger picture. Like, everything has consequences.
Yeah. Sun Tzu would say a good leader is always thinking ahead, anticipating how their choices will play out, both good and bad.
Like a chess master. Always thinking several moves ahead, but then you also have to be able to adapt, right? Things don't always go according to plan.
Exactly. Being able to adapt is huge. If you're too rigid, too stuck to your original plan, you're going to fail.
Yeah, be willing to change course, even if it means abandoning something you put a lot of effort into,
Yeah. It takes humility, being able to admit when you're wrong and trusting your gut.
which is hard, right? We're told that leaders should be confident, never back down.
It's a balance for sure. Sun Tzu would say true strength is about being able to bend without breaking, though.
Adapting to change without losing sight of your goals.
Exactly. Such an important lesson, even all these years later.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of war, I think that's a great place to end. The battlefield might have changed, but the fundamentals, they're still the same.
Well said. Strategy, leadership, understanding people, these are timeless skills.
And by learning them, cultivating self-awareness, and being adaptable, well, who knows what we can achieve. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the art of war. Until next time, stay strategic.